Hey, it's Ed. Welcome to EDTalks. I have my friend Paul Garren. Paul, welcome to EDTalks.
Hi, Ed. Thank you very much for inviting me.
It was great. We reconnected again after several years over at Vive or Hims or someplace. And what you do is so unique, and your story is unique. And I was like, my audience and EDTalks is going to love learning more about Paul. If anyone doesn't know you, I think most people know you, but they may not know some of the things that we might talk about. But you're leading as a CIO at Urban Health Plan, very large, perhaps the largest FQHC in New York City and amongst many of the boroughs. And so we want to talk a little bit about that and then get into leadership. So, Paul, let's talk about Urban Health Plan really quick for those who don't know. Can you tell us a little bit about the FQHC?
Sure. Urban Health Plan is a string of FQHCs. We have about 13 large sites, and we're in about 38 locations throughout New York City. It was founded in the 1970s by Dr. Esquerdo. And I remember Urban Health Plan growing up in the Bronx, going past it to high school and Cardinal Hayes High School. So that's what I knew about it at the time. Years later, circling back to the tail end of my career, I didn't think I would be working back in the Bronx at Urban Health Plan, but they had a need for a CIO, and I was doing C-suite consulting for a while, and they asked me, "Can you stay?" I
Yeah.
said, why not? There's a lot to do here.
You're yeah, you're a servant heart type person, and the mission of Urban Health Plan is very important to the communities where you're located and doing great things for those people in the communities that you serve. And the fact that they have someone as tenured as you as their CIO, I'm sure is a great blessing to the organization. And speaking of CIOs, like someday we'll have to map it, like do a genealogy. But you're one of the first CIOs that I've ever known in healthcare. As in every other industry, there wasn't such a thing as a CIO because tech wasn't seen as strategic. And as time evolved, tech became more strategic and it became a C-suite type position. But that really didn't happen until, maybe 25 years ago. But back in the 90s, you were already a healthcare CIO. But even before that, you were in other industries like insurance. Tell us about your movement from other industries into healthcare and why did you stay in healthcare?
Well, I left the insurance when there was a merger and we were looking to move all of our IT department. We had about 1,200 people in IT at Continental Insurance, and they merged with CNA. And I said, well, I really don't want to go to Chicago. I like Chicago, except in the winter, and I've been there many times working for Continental Insurance. So I noticed that there was a position opening up for CIO at Holy Name Medical Center in Teaneck, New Jersey. Thought it was interesting. I knew where the place was. I had family in Teaneck. I applied. I went through the process, was hired. After being hired, I asked the COO, why did you hire me? I have no healthcare insurance at all, healthcare background at all. I understand the insurance side, which most hospitals don't like insurance people. And he said, if you look around the room, everyone here knows everything about healthcare. No one knows anything about IT. And you have a good background in IT. So that's why I took the role. I worked there 10 years. It was back then, ran an AS400, believe it or not.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And they still do to a certain, is my understanding. I took them from green screen to GUI, and they thought, wow, this is amazing stuff. But again, I came out of the insurance industry, which at the time was probably 10 years ahead of healthcare when it came to IT technology. So I was bringing in things that I knew that they didn't think existed yet. So that's how I was more successful there, because I had multi-industry knowledge.
Yeah.
And continued in healthcare.
Yeah, I think it's always rich to find someone in another industry, bring them in that has experiences that maybe in healthcare, because we do tend to run a little bit behind other industries, has that experience that can bring that to bear. But not everyone stays. In fact, a pretty high percentage don't. But you stayed, Paul, and you've dedicated your life, your career life, for healthcare tech. Why have you stayed?
Well, when I was in New Jersey and in New York, it's a close-knit family of CIOs. We're friends. I actually have to say that there's about 10 CIOs now that we're close friends. We go out to dinner together. We have a lot of fun. We enjoy what we do. So I stayed. And my last role was with Monmouth Medical Center as their CIO, and then Barnabas kind of took them over. So I moved out of that environment to outpatient. Lighthouse International for a few years. I knew they were going to be acquired, so I helped them through that process. Then I was asked to join a consulting firm, which I really enjoyed consulting. Because again, I was multi-industry. I did work at NJ Transit and some other places as a C-suite consultant. Tatum placed me at Urban Health Plan only because they said, you're a Bronx guy, you probably should apply for this one. I said, well, let me finish up my role where I am now at this other health system, and then we'll consider it. So when I went on the interview, it was being back with my old friends.
Yeah.
In fact, as I go through Urban Health Plan's employees, many of them went to my high school, many of them went to my college. So it was Cardinal Hayes, Fordham University, and to this day, it's like being in a family of great people.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah. Whenever I think people are aligned to a common mission and have that passion in healthcare, and there's something I don't have a word for it, so I just say magical, or spiritual, or something magical, spiritual about it. And it just creates this incredible bond. And that's pretty cool. So, Paul, being one of the pioneers in the CIO realm, what would be your advice? So we have 30 some thousand subscribers to this video. What would be your advice to someone who is earlier in their career and wants to be a CIO, right? Because like you and I, when we were younger, we were managers, directors, and we are like, oh, someday that, I want to be like Paul or Sherry, whoever. And so what would be your advice be for that person in order to ultimately achieve their career goal of being a CIO?
Well, the advice would be talk to seasoned CIOs, learn what they're doing, how they're doing it, and try to adopt what's best practices for your organization. Each organization is different, but that's how I learned. I learned from senior people.
Yeah.
I was one of the younger CIOs joining in I was 35, but when I joined HIMSS, and we even had an organization called HISMA, which was a offshoot of HIMSS in New Jersey, I had CIOs who back then were older than me, and I learned from them. I also had CIOs and still have CIO friends who were CIOs at such small places as JP Morgan Chase and a couple other places like that along the insurance industry and financial services. So I learned a lot from those colleagues, and they taught me what to do, how to be a better manager. You evolve as managing teams as you make mistakes along the way. I have a good example. I have a pretty smart infrastructure leader right now. And when he jumped, he was put into the role. I said, you got to take this role because we need you to do it. And he took the role on. He's there a couple of weeks, and he was cleaning up the data center, found a older switch unplugged, so he disconnected it. He didn't realize the whole network was going through it still. He was so upset. And I said, that's a learning experience.
Right.
You figured out what you did, you fixed it, and there's nothing I'm going to tell you except that was an experience that you'll always remember in your lifetime. So those are the things you do. I never come down on people for making mistakes. I say that's a learning experience.
Yeah. That's a great story and great advice. And yeah, reach out to other people more senior, ask questions, learn from their experiences. Yeah, that's all good stuff.
Go to the classes at HIMSS and Vibe. You learn a lot from people there as well.
Yeah.
And become friendly with your vendors because they also have advice that they can give you. When it comes to making certain decisions about technology, there's a lot of choices out there. But if you have a couple of good vendor friends who are technology agnostic, they'll guide you along as well.
Yeah. Paul, those last three things you just mentioned about reaching out to others, observing, learning, asking questions of more senior leaders. And then you talked about the educational aspect, take advantage of all these different educational, both local and regional and national. And then the vendor part, a lot of people don't do that. And you're absolutely right. And you got to find the right partner, right? That's not going to be like every answer to the question is their particular product or service. That's not the right person. But to your point, the one that's agnostic, right? And is just there to help you. And ideally, you're going to buy something from them, but their main intent is not for you necessarily to buy something from them. They're just trying to help you. And they have the benefit, right, of knowing a bunch of Pauls.
Correct.
Not just one. And so, yeah, that's really good advice.
I know one vendor that we met in the 1980s when I was in the insurance industry. He also moved into healthcare technology as a vendor, and we've remained friends over the years. And he's a go-to person when I need a question asked about technologies. Vendor agnostic, because they sell everything anyway. So they're not going to say, oh, the margins are higher on Cisco this week, let's push Cisco, or next week, let's push HP. That's not how it's working with certain vendors. They'll give you the advice, and then you can make more or less the right decision. Again, any technology decision you made 20 years ago could be good, could be bad, because technology changes so rapidly.
Yeah. Hey, Paul, this has been great. Good reminders just for seasoned people like myself, but definitely great advice for up and coming leaders and CIOs. So thank you so much for sharing about the FQHC, about Urban Health Plan, and sharing, some of the wisdom that you've learned over the years.